Today on Making Horror, we discuss making a horror short film on a budget. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Making Horror. I'm your host Ryan Sheets, and before we get into the episode, I'd like to apologize for the severe lack of content in the past couple of months, almost a year. I've actually recently relocated from Indiana down to Florida, and now I'm all settled in and I'm getting back on track. So you'll be seeing more episodes of Making Horror, more short films, and Jeff is going to be starting his own show within the coming weeks, as well as producing some short films as well. We live in a time where pretty much everyone has access to a camera that shoots 1080 or 4K. It's honestly an amazing time to start getting into film. Now, a million YouTubers have already covered the subject of making short films on a budget. So I'm going to go at it from a bit of a different angle and talk to you about making horror short films on a budget. So before we get into anything, let's get the basics out of the way. First things first, if you don't have access to a camera, more than likely you do have access to a camera or know somebody that has a smartphone. So if you go that route, make sure you download the app Filmic Pro. It's an amazing app that utilizes your phone's camera to its fullest extent. You get complete control over focus and exposure, as well as a million other things. It's really a must for anyone who is starting out doing filmmaking on their iPhone. One thing that many beginners tend to overlook is audio. Bad audio can severely damage an otherwise extremely good film. So when you're starting out, if you're going to spend money on anything, I would highly recommend it be a decent microphone. Luckily for you, Rode has pretty much got low-budget filmmakers covered with the Rode VideoMic Me and the Rode VideoMicro. Next up is lighting. Now this can actually be incredibly easy because more likely than not, you've got plenty of lamps all over your house that you can use to introduce lights into your scene. If you want to spend a little bit of money, you can go to any hardware store and pick out some can lights. They're extremely cheap, and you can just put regular halogen bulbs or LED bulbs in them and they will clamp pretty much everywhere. So you've got all of your equipment and you're ready to go out and make a horror film, but where do you start? Well, first, make sure you have a location that you know you have access to. Your house is always a safe bet because the haunting genre is huge right now. The woods is also a pretty good alternative, but make sure that you're not trespassing and have a right to be there. Now what about actors? Well, the great thing about horror is you can make an entire short film just featuring one person. It could even be you. If you're doing a haunting film, you only need one thing for your ghost to be terrorizing. And speaking of ghosts, you know what's so great about them? They're invisible, so use that to your advantage. Doors slamming, things moving on their own, these are all simple techniques that can create the illusion of a supernatural presence. Once you have everything shot, the internet pretty much has you covered from there. There are tons of free editing softwares that you can download and use to stitch your piece together. And on top of that, if you use YouTube's audio library, you will have access to hundreds of royalty-free songs and sound effects to use in your YouTube videos. So there you go. You're all set to go out and make a horror short film. Filmmaking has become more accessible to everyone, so go out and make something great, and I will see you next time on Making Horror.